And it's just another tool. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the more efficient and the more things that you can do. All right, today's video, we're going to talk about wedges, the different styles of wedges, and how can you figure what you can get away with when you're wedging a tree over. So first of all, there's a lot of different styles of wedges. I prefer the plastic ones. If you're going to be cutting timber, that's what you really need. My favorites are these right here. They're called hard heads. And the reason why is because they've got a steel plate here on the end of them. And they got like a tongue that goes up in them right there inside of them. So they hold up really good. You beat on them, the regular ones without it, you'll beat them up pretty bad over time. So here's a large one. They come in different lengths. You can get them shorter than these, and you can get them long or whatever. These are all smooth for singles. And these wedges right here, if you look at them, they got some tongues right there on them on that side. And on this side, they've got grooves. These are called rifled wedges. The reason for that is because you can stack them. They'll lock into one another and they won't slide side to side. A lot of times when you're driving wedges and they're not rifled, want to try to cross on the other one. So you can actually stick a wedge in like this right here and then drive another one up under it, and that'll kind of alleviate that if you don't have any rifled wedges. These are primarily what I'm going to use, are these. These are really handy in the fact that if you hit them with a saw, it's not going to hurt the chain at all unless you hit the steel head right there on them. Then you're fixing to eat your chain up. They're in a high vis color because so if you throw them on the ground, they're easy to see them where they're laying. And then also too, when you're cutting, if you are still cutting, you're not boring, and you hit one of these, you can see the orange or the yellow chips when they come flying out. So therefore, you know you have you've hit your wedge there, and you need to kind of get off of it. But one thing I want to say before we go any further about wedges is, and I'm not trying to be a safety Sally or anything like that, when you go to drive these things, you really need to have a face shield on. Very, very important. I've hit these things before, get them started, rear back, hit them again, and they come flying back out. And man, when one of these things hits you, if it hits you in the face, it knock teeth out. Just crazy damage that it can do to you, because I've actually had them hit me, you know, in the knee and what have you. And with saw pants on, it's not near as impactful because you do have a little bit of cushion. So I would highly recommend wearing some kind of, you know, a screen, a shield, or something on your helmet before you start hammering these wedges in. So these things are tools, just like a chainsaw, just like you know, lots of other things that we use. They're for helping you push a tree over. But how do you know if you drive one of these things all the way in, do you got enough lift to get the tree to go over? A lot of people don't know how to figure that and don't know what all that's about. And so we're going to work. I've got a dry erase board. I've got one of my models right here that I use in the saw class. Use a lot. It's got all kind of different notches in it and everything, different cuts in it. And then here's a big one that I use for illustration. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you how to figure the segments of a tree. And the taller the tree is, the more you can get away with on a wedge. And I'm going to explain to you how to do that. So first and foremost, before you do anything, you always need to go through your 5-step felling plan and have all of that stuff done. You can look it up online and see what it all details. It's very simple, very fast, before you ever stick a saw in a tree. So how do you figure the segments of a tree? Okay, so this is the front of your notch. This will be your back cut. The segment of a tree, the size of the segment is determined from right here at the front of the hinge or the fulcrum to right here. We're gonna work with even numbers to make it simple, to where make it all work out. So whatever distance this is from right here is the size of a segment of a tree. Once you get that, then the tree is basically then in square blocks is the way it works, and we're going to get into that. So again, the segment of the tree, this is a big open face notch, is the distance. The size of the segment is the distance from here to here. Let's say we're fixing to go over and get on a dry erase board. This distance from right here to right there is exactly 1 foot or 12 inches. So that is the size of your square, is 1 foot square. Okay. So we're going to draw. This is 1 foot, 1 foot. So that's 1 foot square. Let's say the tree, I'm off to the side, so it's hard for me to do this. Is 80 feet tall. We decided that our squares are 1 foot by 1 foot. All right, so then that figures out to be, if it's 80 foot tall, you have 80 segments in that tree. 1 foot, 1 foot, by 1 foot, and then that's 1 foot right there. So there's 80 of those. Most wedges you can figure on them having a 1 inch lift, which is this right here. Some of the larger ones go up to 1.25 inches. So you got a 1 inch lift. If you bury this wedge into that tree, into that curve, to where it's completely flush with the meat of that tree, on an 80 segment tree, how far are you going to move this tree that way or the other way? It does not matter. How far, what's the distance on the tip top that you're going to move it that way? You're going to be your 1 foot squares. It's 80 segments in it, 1 inch. You're going to move that tree 80 inches to the right or to the left. Let's change it a little bit. Those are 1 foot. Let's pretend like this distance from right here to right there changes to 2 foot. All right. All right. Your squares are 2 foot, all right? Let's say the tree is still 80 feet tall. Now you're dealing with 2 foot squares. If you take this same wedge and there's 2 foot squares on it and it's an 80 foot tree, how many segments do you have then? You're going to have 40 segments, right? Because you increased it. Okay? 40 instead of 80. You're still dealing with an 80 foot tree, but you got 2 foot segments. If you take and you drive this wedge in and you bury it all the way in and you lift this thing, how far are you going to move it to the side or to the forward or to the back? How far are you going to move that top then? On an 80 foot tree with 2 foot segments, there's 40 segments in it. 40 inches. That's the reason why the taller the tree is, the more you can get away with. The trees out there on the West Coast are very, very tall. A lot of our trees around here, I mean, we have 100+ footers around here, but most of our trees are going to be, you know, 70, 80, 90 foot. So when the shorter the tree is, the less movement and the less that you can get away with as far as that goes. So I kept it simple, you know, using 1 foot or 2 foot squares. And basically you're imagining that tree in square blocks all the way up. So if you lift this one an inch, it's going to move this one an inch, this one an inch. So as you go up higher, then that movement is going to be further over to the thing. So if you're taking, you know, an 80-foot tree that's got 1 foot segments on it, you can move that thing quite a little ways to get it over. Now that's in a great, you know, a perfect scenario as to what's in front of you. And always remember that it doesn't matter on what you did on the tree before. It's all about what you're working with, what's in front of you at the time being. So we're working with a perfect, you know, a perfect world. We got a tree here, comes up. We're at the ground right there. And then we got this big old top in it. Say we want the tree to go this way. Say we've got a giant limb right here. This is a big leader style limb that juts off of this thing. And it's got a pretty good crown out there on the end of it. See how far it comes out past the main crown right there. And that happens a lot of times. Well, you might take, so you've got your notch right there, and you're making your cut right with the saw going into your notch. You start wedging that thing over. You want it to go, you want that tree to go that way. All right. Is that 1 inch lift right here going to give you enough to get that tree to go over? Without this limb, yes, that will be no problem. You can wedge it over. With this limb, a 1 inch lift on the tree to that scale right there, you're not going to get that giant limb past this part right here. This limb is going to act just like it's got a guy wire on it, holding it to the ground. Unless you wedge it far enough over to where this center mass of it gets going that way. In these situations like this, you run into these a lot. There's a house. See, there's a house right here. Trees grow out over houses because that's the footprint where all the sunlight is right there. And so you'll end up with that situation a lot. You'll bury that wedge in, that tree will just sit right there, ain't going nowhere. If that limb wasn't in there, again, it would go ahead and fall. So what I do on them, or the best thing to do on them, is have a tip line up here in it, where you got a tip line tied up there in it, and it goes out here attached to a machine or something out there to pull that tree. That way you can keep moving that tree. Your wedge is going to be limited on your lift down here. This right here, unless you run out of room, back behind you, you're unlimited on what you can do that way. So you can tie that rope, you can put it in the top of it if you got a lift or a climber. You can put that rope in the top of it. You can also take and you can throw a rope up and you can go over that limb and come back down, and you can tie around the base. It does not matter that you've got an anchored right here, because it's going to pull from right here is where it's going to pull from, back down the same way. The higher you are in the tree, the more leverage that you've got. A lot of times just a man on a rope has enough power to pull on a tree, unless it's a really large one, to pull the tree several feet one way or the other. Always remember though, go back. Everything starts with a 5-step filling plan on what you're doing. So that's the beauty of the wedges and what you can get away with. A lot of these trees that you see a lot of us working with in videos and everything, me, August Hunnicky, a lot of other guys that are on YouTube, Rion Rounds, we're dealing with this same stuff. We'll go back and we'll draw this tree here. And we're gonna put it in. It's the ground. We're gonna put us a notch right here. And then we've got our top. So we're gonna go back over this one more time. Say this distance from is 1 foot. 1 foot from right there to right there. And then you're sitting there with 1 foot squares going all the way up. This tree 80 foot, 1 inch wedge, driving it that way. We're going to move that tree 80 inches. So this is 2 foot. And then you've got, so you've got a square, the marker's not going right. "80-foot tree, 2 foot squares." You're going to move that tree 40 inches. So it's very important to know before you start, is a wedge going to be able to do it, or are you going to have a tip line in it to pull that tree, to move it far enough to go over. Those trees I just recently did with Derek on the cutter pulling, those trees definitely had to have a tip line in them to pull them over. Maybe that made sense. Maybe it helped you understand that. I know I talk slow. I'm from the South, and that's just the way that it is. But I wish that when I was being explained this, that I would have had, a diagram like that where I could look at, because we were just standing and talking. And it took me a little while to kind of grasp it. And I was explained it back several years ago, and it was so far over my head I didn't understand it. And then I was with Tim Ard about 3 years ago, and I asked him about it, and he started explaining it to me, and he went through it twice. And that's the second time he was talking about it, because we were standing outside, it was in the dark, and then all of a sudden I grasped it. But like I said, it makes more sense like that. So let me know your thoughts down below, if that helped you, or that makes sense, or whatever along those lines. to help understand some of the dynamics and the geometry of the wedge, not just looking at a wedge and seeing it as a plastic thing to push on the tree, but what it's capable of doing in the lift that you can get from it. So I want to ask this question too. Notches in trees. I have a lot of wood right here that I've got cut that's on different angles that I do demonstrations with in the saw classes on notches and how notches and hinges work. That's what this piece of wood is for right here. So if you would like something along those lines, explaining notches in the different styles of notches, what they're for, when to use them, and just all that stuff, kind of like I did here on the dry erase board, let me know down in the comments and I'll build a video like that, because this thing's got them all in it. I mean, it's got a Humboldt up here, it's got a big open face with a bore behind it. We can get into that and go over that in the different things. There's a Humboldt at the top. There's a stump shot notch right here where you're cutting above your apex. We can get into that and I can explain that to you, because the thing about it is you can do it however you want to do it. I'm just trying to get a baseline for people that either don't cut all the time, you know, homeowner, maybe a farmer, got a ranch, something like that out there, kind of give them a kind of a baseline, or maybe even somebody who does cut all the time and they're really, really good, but they've never had this stuff explained to them like this. And it's just another tool. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the more efficient and the more things that you can do. And it's like I said in the video the other day, you want to stack the deck in your favor before you ever even crank the chainsaw up and take off cutting in it. Because say there's a house right here or a house right there, you do not want to hit anything on somebody's property. A fence is one thing, but you start tearing up what I would call, you know, high dollar property, a house, mobile home, barn, shed, something like that. And it happens a lot. It happens all the time across these landscapes, and you can have that stuff happen. You know, there's tons of videos out there where cranes should take everything completely out of the equation and stack the deck completely 100% in your favor for getting it done. However, if a crane is not used right, it can go bad quick, fast, and in a hurry. And there's tons and tons of video out there of crane failures, people who made bad decisions, bad choices on their rigging, the rigging to pieces, the way the crane was set up, and things went awry and they ended up with a crane through a house or over, or a tree through a house, or on somebody, and everything like that. So I'm throwing out a baseline there, and then you can take it. It's up to you to ultimately decide that tree that's in front of you at the time is the only one that matters at the time. Once you get that one down and it does not matter, then it's the next tree in line that's in front of you. And there's no two trees that are the same. They're all different. So always remember that. If you're still here and watching, I do appreciate it. And again, let me know if you want something on the notches and hinges, how to figure them, the different ones, all that stuff. And I'll sit down and I'll build a video like it. We'll catch y'all later. Later, taters.